one can say that the beauty of America is that within the five of us who are here having this conversation, we each come from a different background. We each have characteristics that change our definition of what America is. So starting with Lee, and then we'll go around the table. Would you say that your definition of America changed after having produced and seen the final product of Little America?
I like that question. My dad is Israeli, and he came here in '76, and so I've always I grew up outside of Boston, and so 80% of my parents' friends were Israelis or Russians or had come from Israel, and so that was just kind of part of my experience. But seeing it from all these different cultures and talking to the actors and talking to the dialect coaches and the cultural consultants that we had for every episode, you realize how similar we all are too. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was something that was really exciting. And me and Kumail and Emily wrote the Iranian episode, and the director was Persian. And he said, "Oh, how'd you guys capture this?" And so much of that for me was pulling from my dad, and he's kind of a hustler and an entrepreneur and is obsessed with Shark Tank. And so, you know what I mean? Like,
obsessed with Shark Tank?
Who isn't obsessed with Shark Tank? And it turns out everyone is. And so if you write about Shark Tank, then people think that you're writing about them. No, but I felt like there was just a collection of people that were really passionate about it, and that everyone was coming at it from a different place. But the stories really felt like they were on top of one another in a great way.
Mm-hmm. Come on.
I don't think my definition of America has really changed. In my experience, America has always felt to me like two completely different things, where there's one where I felt very welcomed. I moved here in 97 from Pakistan. Felt very welcomed by the people I'm lucky to be friends with. I also have felt not welcome by people who are not friends with me, and, stuff you read in the news. I remember I used to live in Chicago, and then I think it was either I was living in New York or LA. I was doing a tour, and I was in Ohio. I was at the Ohio airport walking around, and I saw all these people looking at me, and I was like, "Oh, why are they looking at me? What's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, they're looking at me because I'm a brown guy," and I just had forgotten. That was a look I had gotten used to being in Iowa.
Yeah.
And then I had forgotten that look because I'd lived in New York and LA for so long. So I've always felt like there's these different sort of sides of America, and I feel like the people who are a little more xenophobic are people who have not been in touch with people who are different from them. Mm-hmm. So, identity is something I struggle with because I part of me feels American, but part of your membership in a group depends on other members of that group welcoming you as a member, and some of them do, and a lot of them don't. So, something I'm still negotiating. It's complicated.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this show has been part of this sort of personal arc that I've been on, which is, I grew up in Riverside, California, which is close to LA, but is totally different in terms of the culture and the politics. It's kind of a blue-collar town. It's voted Republican almost every election until the last one. And when I was growing up there, my parents are immigrants from Taiwan, and they came in the 70s, and there weren't that many Asian people in Riverside. And so basically my, journey as a kid was to fit in with people who didn't look like me, so I learned to get along. My high school was basically majority Latino, black, and white, basically, and there weren't any other kids who looked like me, so I learned to code switch and get along, and for lack of a better word, assimilate, which I think is a very sort of common thing for Asian Americans because there ain't that many of us in a lot of places. So and that kind of went along with my career, right? So I started out and I was working for other shows and working for other people essentially, and I learned how to do that, and I learned from great writers and I worked for Greg Daniels and Mike Schur on Parks and Recreation, and again, learned a lot. And it wasn't until recently with the stuff that I've done more, recently in my career, that you kind of use all the tools you learned from fitting in and then ascribe your own personal stamp on everything, so you sort of subsume your voice for a while, and then you're able to apply it, or at least that was the case in my own personal.
It's also
career.
interesting for someone who's Asian growing up here, because in pop culture you don't see any images of yourself, so it's very hard to style yourself on, because so much I think kids watch people who look like themselves on TV and be like, "Oh, I want to be a version of that." And when you don't have that, that's going to be a complicated
It's
thing.
super strange. I remember resenting Bruce Lee. And why would you
Oh,
resent Bruce
interesting.
Lee? It's because he was the only one. So when you get called Bruce Lee on the playground, you resent it. And it's like, he should be a hero. But he was the only one. So it was like, I'm nothing like him. I don't know
Yeah.
martial arts, you know? It's
Yeah,
like,
that's
I
how-
speak English without an accent. you
Yeah,
know? It's like,
ask Indian Pakistani kids how they feel about Apu.
yeah,
Oh,
and it's just like
interesting.
you resent it, even though it's the only representation you have.
Just because I'm running out of time with you, I want to get Emily's.
Please, yeah, please.
I would just say my experience of America expanded more when being married to Kumail as he went through the process of citizenship here. And I think that was something really eye-opening to me as a person who's always kind of, my citizenship is a given, my membership is a given, born and raised here, I'm quite white. And so I think watching that process and seeing how terrifying and bureaucratic and bleak it could be to go through that process, I kind of feel like what I wanted to get across with this show is kind of, if you are living in a place, as I grew up, that doesn't have a lot of people, it's pretty pretty white, pretty homogenous all the way around, letting people get a peek inside of other people's lives, letting people get a peek inside of other people's realities, and seeing what the process is different for other people, that it actually America feels different to other people. That's something that I will say I didn't fully understand until being married to Kumail. And so I think then getting to make a show that other people can watch and experience if they're not married to Kumail